Welcome to the Chicago Public Library Foundation Awards. Thank you for joining us tonight to celebrate great stories and story makers in a year full of plot twists. I'm Bill Kurtis, and I'll be your MC for this evening's show, where we flip the script and bring our annual awards event to you. A cast of characters for the evening, narrating the tale of our library Foundation, and incredible honorees are Chicago Public Library Foundation Chair, Bob Wislow. Chair of the Chicago Public Library, Linda Johnson Rice. Library Foundation Vice Chair and President of presenting sponsor BMO Harris Bank, Dave Casper. Library Foundation President, Brendan Langstratt. And NPR Weekend Edition Saturday host, Scott Simon. A few special guests will drop by, but surprises are best saved for later. It's been 20 years since the first Carl Sandburg Literary Awards dinner. And in those 20 years, we've honored literary giants, the likes of Kurt Vonnegut, Salman Rushdie, Margaret Atwood, and Toni Morrison. The 21st Century Award has celebrated the next generation of authors influencing the literary world, including Rebecca Skloot, Amina Gautier, Natalie Y. Moore, Erica L. Sanchez, and Dr. Eve L. Ewing. In addition to these awards, each year we have a parade of our local Chicago authors. And over the years, we have celebrated hundreds of authors, playwrights, poets, and even puppeteers, many of whom are watching us tonight. Welcome. So tonight, it is my honor to introduce you to our three honorees, whose accomplishments, talent, and incredible creativity help us delve into the past to reimagine our present and reshape our communities. Our honorees this evening speak of the important ways Chicago Public Library has played a formative role in their lives, or should I say, a transformative role in their lives. So tonight, as we gather, let's be reminded of the ways public libraries have transformed all of us. And now this year's honorees are author, poet, playwright, rapper, educator, and more. This year's 21st Century Award honoree, Nate Marshall. Someone whose creative power and boundless support for the city of Chicago knows no limits. The first ever Civic Award honoree, Donna LaPietra. And this year's Carl Sandburg Literary Award honoree, winner of the Pulitzer Prize, National Humanities Medal, and former 2013 and 14 One Book, One Chicago author for Warmth of Other Suns, Isabel Wilkerson. We'll hear more from our honorees later in the evening. To start, how about a collective toast? And who better to do that than President of presenting sponsor BMO Harris Bank, my friend Dave Casper. Please join Dave and me and raise your glass. Dave, here's to you.
Thank you so much, Bill. What an honor to be with you all tonight. BMO Harris Bank is proud to once again be the presenting sponsor of the Chicago Public Library Foundation Awards. First, I'd like to congratulate the 21st Century Award honoree, Nate Marshall, and the Carl Sandburg Literary Award honoree, Isabel Wilkerson. And secondly, I'd like to propose a toast to my fellow board member, Donna LaPietra. When we decided to institute a civic award, my fellow Library Foundation directors and I felt that Donna was the obvious choice. I know that those of you who know Donna will agree. And for those who don't know her, I'm excited for you to get to know her tonight. So, Donna, we couldn't be more honored to present the Civic Award to you. And here's to you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening, and thank you to everything you do to advance our city's great Chicago Public Library. Cheers.
I'm Brenda Langstrat, president of the Chicago Public Library Foundation. Thank you so much, Dave and BMO Harris Bank, for your incredible longtime support and partnership. And to all of our sponsors that you saw scrolling at the beginning of the program, our deepest thank you. I want to also thank our extraordinary board of directors and associate board for their creativity, support, and commitment in making tonight happen. Tonight, you will learn about the Chicago Public Library Foundation and how we partner with Chicago Public Library. So let me tell you a little bit about how it works. For more than 30 years, through the vision of our founders and generosity of our donors, we have launched and sustained innovative programs that transform lives and communities. We are in every neighborhood for every Chicagoan. So think of our Library Foundation as the lever that provides resources so that Chicago Public Library can create these innovative programs. And this is made possible through every dollar that is donated to our foundation. In March, because of COVID-19, we shifted, created robust virtual programming, and I'm really excited to share a compilation of some of that programming with you later this evening. But the work did not stop. In fact, the innovation, the focus, and the commitment accelerated. It was a moment when our community truly came together. You all came together in so many ways, understanding that we needed to reach our city's communities during this time. And so we did, and we are. And it remains critical that we reach Chicagoans and beyond, wherever they may be, at home, online, or in our library branches. So much of this is possible because of you. Thank you for being here tonight, and to all who have made a donation at any level, thank you. If you have not already given, we certainly encourage you to do so through the link at the bottom of your screen. We also encourage you to follow us on social media, as we will have many exciting updates and want you to be tuned in to the work. To tell us more, honorary co-chairs Mayor Lori Lightfoot and First Lady Amy Eshelman.
Amy and I are proud to join you as the honorary co-chairs of the 2020 Library Foundation Awards. We also want to give a special thanks to Bob Wislow and the Foundation Board for shifting the Sandberg Awards dinner to this virtual platform. Tonight's presenting sponsor, BMO Harris, and a great civic leader, Dave Casper, a tireless advocate for Chicago Public Library and the City of Chicago. For more than 30 years, this public-private partnership has advanced innovative programs that create transformative learning experiences for patrons of all ages. Through this virtual format, we are able to reach people both within and beyond Chicago and prove that our libraries are more than just book repositories. They are gathering places for community, learning, and refuge.
Tonight we honor Nate Marshall with the 21st Century Award and the great Donna LaPietra, who truly embodies the spirit of the inaugural Civic Award, as well as Isabel Wilkerson, who has become the second One Book, One Chicago author after Toni Morrison to be a Carl Sandburg Literary Awardee. That's pretty good company. Congratulations to tonight's awardees, and thank you all for joining tonight's event and supporting our great library system, which continues to provide the educational, cultural, and social supports we need to foster equity, inclusion, and healing in Chicago.
To introduce our first honoree, the 21st Century Award winner, is Chicago Public Library Foundation Chair Bob Wislow.
Thank you, Bill, for being a longtime MC. We're so grateful for your support and commitment to our library. And thank you to all of you for joining us tonight. It's such an honor to share this special evening and these awards with you. To kick off tonight's awards celebration, it's my great honor to introduce this year's 21st Century Award winner. This award is given to a Chicago author whose contributions advance artistic excellence. When we heard Nate Marshall's interview with Scott Simon on National Public Radio, we knew immediately that he's a unique artist who embodies this award. Nate wears many hats: assistant professor of English at Colorado College, playwright, rapper, poet, and community-engaged artist. His first book, Wild Hundreds, was the Black Caucus of American Library Association's Poetry Book of the Year. The Chicago Tribune calls his new book, Finna, full of precision and exuberance, excellence, and rollicking good humor. Nate is a proud Chicago native, raised in West Pullman, and the grandson of a Chicago public librarian. Having frequented the Walker, Woodson, and Harold Washington library branches, Nate is no stranger to the power of our Chicago Public Library. It is with great pleasure that we present this year's 21st Century Award to Nate Marshall.
Thank you, Bob, for that kind introduction. I first want to acknowledge that the land that we know as Chicago includes the traditional homelands of the Kickapoo, Peoria, Potawatomi, Miami nations, and the people of the Council of Three Fires, including the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, Odawa, as well as the Menominee and Ho-Chunk nations. As we think about the city we love and how to be in service of it, I ask each of us to also consider these peoples, their wisdom, and how we might chart a path not just toward a desegregated city, but also a decolonized one. I would first like to thank the Chicago Public Library Foundation and their partners and workers who have made today possible. I don't take this honor lightly, and it's no small thing to build an event like this while in the midst of unimaginable crisis. This is a wondrous moment, despite our larger challenges, and perhaps because of them, and because of the ways that we all persevere through days such as these. When I was in high school, my English teacher on the last day of class shared a poem with us. The poem was from the writer Naomi Shihab Nye, and it was called Because of Libraries We Can Say These Things. Before she shared the piece, our teacher told us, if you don't remember anything from this class, remember this. The poem ends with the line, her life starts here. So let me tell you about where I started. If you know anything about me, you should know I'm from Chicago. Specifically, I'm from the far South Side. Born at Roseland Hospital, raised in Riverdale and West Pullman, schooled in Beverly and Mount Greenwood, forged in the farthest reaches of this place we call the city. That's me. I am from where we can unironically call Hyde Park up north. My parents grew up in those same far reaches and still live there. My family has been in Chicago for the last century. My last living grandfather grew up in the shadow of the then newly constructed Ida B. Wells homes. He still lives in the city under the blur of Alzheimer's now, but still here and ever here. I was raised by many people, including, you guessed it, a librarian. My grandmother, Mary Frances Green Griffin, who herself grew in Alabama and migrated to Detroit and then later to Chicago, where she would get her master's in library science at what was then called Chicago State College, and work 40 years in Chicago public schools. It was she who first put books into my hand. Any book I wanted. She told me, look, it's all food and it'll all feed you. As she handed me the works of Gwendolyn Brooks and Iceberg Slim, Judy Blume and Dan Brown, George Orwell, and Zora Neale Hurston. It was my grandma who gave me my love for librarians and, yes, for libraries. From the Walker branch, where I'd thumb through Science Fair project idea books, to the Harold Washington, where I'd go as a kid to meet my mom after I took piano lessons at Dearborn Station while she sat and did paperwork for her second or third job to pay for those lessons, to the Woodson, where I'd take the bus alone and learn how to fall in love with the archives in the Vivian G. Harsh Research Center. Chicago Public Libraries has been a central part of my life. One summer, when I was home from college, I ran into a kid I had known in high school. He was a few years younger than me and in his senior year. When we met, we embraced, and after exchanging greetings, he told me he had been suspended from school. He also told me he was spending his off days in the then newly opened U-Media space at the Harold Washington Library. He was working on a mixtape and asked me to come check it out. And so I walked down State Street with this weird kid named Chancellor to the library where I listened to the beginnings of what would become the mixtape 10 Day by Chance the Rapper. Thank God Chance had the library to pass that time. Thank God he had mentors like the late Brother Mike. Thank God I had those same spaces and those same loving hands. Perhaps it is only an institution such as the library, one that is rigorously literate and public, that can imagine how to treat a Black child like a child to be poured into and not a social problem to be solved or disappeared. I always think about something when I think about libraries, and it's not an original thought, I should say that, but whenever I think about libraries, I consider how many people today, if we were starting public libraries in this country, would decry these institutions as a waste of funding, as centers of liberal indoctrination, or as harbingers of the coming socialism. I can hear the cries now. Why is Lakeview money going to fund Pullman libraries? Why not let Pullman have local control, and if they want a library, they can put their money towards one? Who among us can doubt that this would be the line of logic if CPL were not a series of buildings in 2020, but rather a petition on the clipboards and in the hearts of organizers? With that in mind, I urge you to move in the tradition of the wide-eyed, broad-based, public, radical imagination that created the public library. I urge you to remember in these days when people in power will dismiss different ways of running the world as unrealistic or a fairy tale, that maybe, just maybe, fairy tales are the only tales worth telling. Take it from me, a kid from miles past the end of the red line who was raised by people who come from the fairy tales of the abolition of slavery and the fairy tales of the banishment of Jim Crow and the fairy tales of the struggle against Northern racism and the fairy tales of the recovery of addicts and the fairy tales of the dignity of poor people. If you can't tell a fairy tale, then you can't tell a damn thing. I'd like to end with a poem, and I'd like to dedicate it specifically to the legacy of Black women librarians and educators who I owe so much. In particular, the legend Vivian G. Harsh, my middle school English teacher, Mrs. Cap, my dear, dear friend Eve Ewing, and the great love of my life, Allison Canada Rollins, who is referenced in the poem. This poem is called Imagine. You better imagine like your life depends, because it does. That boredom out of which making is made is the only thing. Consider that somebody first had to pick through all the prehistoric plants and sniff and taste, and sometimes diarrhea or even die, just so you would know that a collard green with the right seasoning is a season that lasts centuries. Consider that somebody gazed at a star and said, "I bet," and built a fire. Consider the first Negro on the first plantation who figured which way was north, maybe before they knew the word for north, and ran. Consider my love, with the middle name the enslaved dreamed of running towards. See how I move swift in her direction. Consider how love is a great idea we keep having every day. We imagine being together, and that is the first step. Thank you. Thank you all so much.
Hey, Nate, congratulations. I don't know if you know this, but you are my play relative in my head. And now going forward, you can sit with the other winners before we go on stage when we get out of the pandemic. And that means me, Eve, Nami, and Erica. And we can't wait to have you with us.
When I began reading Wild Hundreds, I heard a voice that sang in unfamiliar rhythms, challenging me to leave my comfort zone. Your Chicago has become my Chicago. Your voice has encouraged thousands of young people to find their voices. I can't imagine a more deserving recipient of the Chicago Public Library Foundation's 21st Century Award. Kudos from my heart.
Nate, I'm going to try so hard not to cry. Nathaniel Armstead Marshall, my homie, my brother, my partner in crime, my artistic collaborator, my whole heart. Congratulations on this incredible, just incredibly well-deserved honor. I'm so, so proud of you. So grateful for the opportunity to celebrate with you because you are the best. And, as you know, because you've heard me say it a million times before, there's something that you said to me several years ago that it's stuck with me all this time, and I say it to other people constantly, which is that the greatest thing a poem or a poet can give is permission. And you and I are here and have done the work that we've been blessed to do in this life because so many other people came before us and gave us permission. People like Carl Sandburg, people like our forever muse, our hero, Miss Gwendolyn Brooks. And Nate, we are celebrating you tonight because you have given so many people permission. You're going to make fun of me later for crying. So many people permission through your art, through your work, to expand their vocabulary, their understanding of what artistic legacy looks like, what poetry looks like, what a poem is, what things are worthy of poetry. I would not be here in the way that I am, moving through the world in the way that I do without you. I'm so grateful and so glad to be on this planet in this century with you. I love you so much.
Good evening. My name is Mary Ellen Messner, and I'm Acting Commissioner for the Chicago Public Library, and I'm honored to be with you here tonight. Congratulations, Nate, and thank you for that heartfelt tribute to our city's library and librarians across Chicago, nationally, and the world, who open windows and doors of possibility to individuals and families and seniors and our young people on a daily basis. I want to start by thanking Mayor Lori Lightfoot and First Lady Amy Eshelman for their continued commitment and support of the Chicago Public Library. And I want to recognize and thank our talented, dedicated staff who serve Chicagoans every day, making their lives richer and greater. I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. I'm honored that you chose to join us and support our library. And I want to thank our incredible partner, the Chicago Public Library Foundation, for their unwavering support and transformative investments that make so much of what we do possible. Even during these unprecedented times, our library serves as a beacon of hope, as we have for nearly 150 years. We meet Chicagoans and those beyond Chicago where they are at, whether at home, online, or visiting our local branch. Through our partnership with the foundation, we have continued to develop innovative and engaging services and programs to reach every Chicagoan and people far beyond. One example, this summer, our signature Summer Learning Challenge that engaged thousands of children, youth, and families. We created over 100,000 Take and Go kits, really do-it-yourself activities that families could do together, at home, and safely. And through our virtual programs funded by the foundation, we were able to continue our Teacher in the Library program, One Book, One Chicago, U-Media, Chi-Teen Lit Fest, and so much more. And as of today, we announced that we will be providing thousands of grab-and-go kits for students to learn and have fun over the winter break through our partnership with My Chi, My Future. And we continue to reach a global audience through our signature Storytime Live from the Library. I hope you all have seen it. If not, you're going to see it tonight. Featuring our librarians and many other familiar faces to you that you will see on the clip we will share shortly. I want to thank our partners at FCB Global who have made this program and so much more possible for our library. Enjoy this clip and enjoy your evening. Thank you.
If the library closed forever, I will be really, really sad. I don't know how to explain life without a library.
Like one of my favorite things to do with my parents.
I don't think I could live without a library.
Due to the threat of COVID-19, the city is closing.
It's temporarily closing.
Hi, I'm Barack Obama.
And I'm Michelle.
Welcome to Live from the Library. Today we thought we'd read you a story.
Hi, girls and boys. My name is Jane.
Hey everyone, my name is Carmen.
I'm Chelsea Clinton.
I'm Gabrielle Union.
I'm Kristen Bell. This is my best buddy, Frank.
I'm Mary Lori Lightfoot.
I'm John C. Riley.
Hi, everybody. I'm Oprah Winfrey. Welcome to Live from the Library.
Now tonight, Cheryl has a story to tell you, and this one actually is good for kids.
Well, the Chicago Public Library buildings are, of course, closed right now, but story time still goes on with Live from the Library.
Live from the Library.
Live from the Library series.
Some familiar faces will help Chicago kids get involved in reading. The library asked dozens of people with Chicago ties to film themselves reading children's books.
Live on social media.
Just give back to kids and remind them that everything's going to be okay during this tough time.
Thanks for being with us. Hope you enjoyed today's book. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
And now, to present the inaugural Civic Award, Chicago Public Library and Library Foundation chairs Linda Johnson-Rice and Bob Wislow.
The Chicago Public Library Foundation Civic Awards celebrates leaders whose work significantly contributes to the strength and vitality of our great city. This award exemplifies the way our Chicago Public Library serves its patrons and celebrates Chicagoans who go far beyond to carry this mission throughout their personal lives. Donna LaPietra embodies the spirit of this award. Donna has served on our Library Foundation board for over 20 years and has been the creative genius behind our Carl Sandburg Literary Awards for more than 10 years. She's deeply involved with many other civic-minded arts and cultural organizations in the city, serving on the board of Navy Pier, and is the chair and president of the Millennium Park. Donna is in a class of her own when it comes to telling stories that catch the imagination. Tonight, we celebrate how deeply Donna has impacted our Library Foundation and how she has truly shaped our city in so many ways.
Donna LaPietra is among 14 candidates running for one of 3 delegate seats in her district in western Pennsylvania. Delegates usually get sent to political conventions because they have a lot of money to give to the party or because they're politically important people. Donna LaPietra is not politically important and does not have a lot of money.
Hi, it's Peter Sagal from Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. I understand you're looking for Donna LaPietra and you'd like to find her. I can help. Here's how you find Donna. Find some major cultural event. It'll be one of the ones with like really amazing food and cocktails and amazing entertainment or speakers, and it will be benefiting a cultural institution so important that you refer to it with the rather than an you know, like the ballet, the museum, you know what I mean.
Thank John Bryan, his committee, Donna LaPietra.
Now, when you get there to find her, don't look among the guests who are like having a good time and enjoying themselves. And especially don't look at the tables where people are eating. And all the time I've known her, I've never seen Donna eat anything more substantial than tomato soup. No, if you want to find Donna, you have to go backstage. You know, the place where the decisions are being made and the logistics are being handled and the celebrities are being wrangled. And if you work your way through the assistants and the volunteers to where the action is, to where the room is, where it happens, there you will find a slender woman wearing a cocktail dress, always holding a clipboard. Congrats, you have found Donna.
I don't know everything Donna's been doing. I can show you what she's been making me do.
So if you want to find Donna LaPietra, all you have to do is find out where something is happening and then look for the person who is making it happen. That's Donna.
Thank you for making our city a better place to live, work, learn, read, play, dance.
You are tireless. You're creative with a capital C. You are amazing.
Thank you so much for all that you do for our great city.
This award could not come to a better human being.
Congratulations, Donna.
Our friend, Donna LaPietra, what a force. I'm so grateful to join Bob in presenting this award. On behalf of the Chicago Public Library and Library Foundation boards, thank you for your commitment to our city.
Thank you, Linda and Bob and all my fellow foundation board members for this civic award. Now, how lucky I would be to find my way to so many of Chicago's nonprofit organizations, where at their soul is volunteerism, and at their heart is a vital mission to serve. Certainly, any organization can be quite targeted and small, but seen together, you realize they are what keeps the lifeblood of the total social fabric pumping. And they do it through the opportunities that they offer, the helping hands they extend, the refuge they provide, the culture they preserve, and the arts that they allow to flourish. And the Chicago Public Library does all of those, as well as being a free place to allow curiosity and creativity to run wild. I'll admit that I'm not sure I saw this night in my future, or could know that more than 20 years ago, Cindy Pritzker would ask me to join the Library Foundation board that she founded, and where I have joyously remained ever since. I owe so much to Cindy, and I dedicate this award to her. I know she's probably not aware, but she has been my role model for service. but also for fostering fearlessness, for visionary thinking, for rewarding the risk takers, and for a wide, diverse embrace of people and ideas. It strikes me that there could be no better definition of civic engagement and of a public library than that. So thank you all for all that you do, and for this, I will always cherish it.
As a judge, I have the authority to perform marriages. On December 13, 2017, I was privileged to preside over the marriage of Bill and Donna in the courtroom of the Illinois Supreme Court. Of course, Donna produced the ceremony to the theme, "At Last." No one can think of a more deserving recipient of this inaugural civic award. At last, all of her legion of friends and admirers can join in the acclaim she so richly deserves.
Impossible, others said, when she saw beautiful potential in the cavernous UIC forum. Impossible, they shouted at her, when she said she could put 100 different Chicago writers on stage for 10 years running. Impossible again to the elusive musical genius Stephen Sondheim. I guess that Donna LaPietra never learned the meaning of the word impossible. Thank you for keeping your magic wand at the ready and continuing to make impossible things happen every day. No one could be better deserving of this award. We love you, my friend. Mwah.
Donna, Donna, you're like a second mama. Sing your praises to the world, you know I'm gonna make a rap for my favorite auntie. Cause when I grow, I'ma be like Miss LaP. I met you and the light was flamed. You're a fire that could never be tamed. A visionary with the style to match, and you are so much more than Bill's better half. Inspiration to us all. You're patient and you're all that. A strong woman who keeps us all enthralled. All in all, no rap could do you justice. Gender roles done all got busted. Open up the world for girls like me. I gotta thank you sincerely.
Donna, it means so much to give you this award. Not only have you shaped our city in more ways than we could ever reflect in this event, but you've shaped so many of our lives, mine included. Thank you, Donna. Again, I just want to say thank you to each of you. What an extreme and rare honor to be brought into your home. On behalf of the Foundation Board, our Associate Board, and our incredible staff team, it is especially meaningful to share space with you in this year of complexity and change. The library connects all of us. The library is like no other place. It bridges communities and it welcomes us to enter as we are. The Library Foundation community, all of us together, provide the fuel that drives programs that close the academic opportunity gap, ignite creativity and connection, and bridge the digital divide. And we have really important work to do right now. All of this is possible because of you. So if you can give tonight at any level, please do so. And thank you for being with us tonight and for standing with our city's public library.
And now for the grand finale, the presentation of the Carl Sandburg Literary Award, presented by Chicago Public Library Chair Linda Johnson Rice.
The Carl Sandburg Literary Award is presented to an author who has made a significant contribution to the literary canon. Recently interviewed about receiving this award, Isabel Wilkerson said, "This is a profound honor for me." The honor is ours. We have the privilege of presenting the Carl Sandburg Literary Award to former One Book, One Chicago program author, someone who has spotlighted Chicago in all its storm, husk, and brawl throughout her career. Isabel Wilkerson is the first African-American woman to win the Pulitzer Prize in Journalism, a National Humanities Award winner, and a true pioneer in nonfiction and journalism. The American Prospect has called her work the missing piece of our country's history. Isabel's new book, Cast: The Origins of Our Discontents, was published in August of 2020 to critical acclaim, with the New York Times calling it an instant American classic. And it was chosen by Oprah for her monthly book club, who has called Cast the most important book of this generation. It is with great pleasure that I introduce this year's Carl Sandburg Literary Award recipient, Isabel Wilkerson, featured in conversation with beloved NPR Weekend Edition Saturday host, dear friend of our Chicago Public Library and Library Foundation, and Cubs devotee, Scott Simon.
Thanks very much for inviting me back this year. Thanks to Mayor Lightfoot and to First Lady Amy Eschliman for their dedication to libraries, for their love of literature and the arts, which mean a lot, especially in this time. Bob Wislow, who of course is chair of the Library Foundation. And, you know, a particular word, if I might, to the 21st Century Award winner, Nate Marshall. I consider myself blessed, and that's the word I use, to have come across his poems a number of months ago, and I read them and I thought, my gosh, this is a writer who not only evokes but extends Carl Sandburg. And it just strikes me that his poems are outstanding, and I think that he should win this award, and that there should be that affiliation with Carl Sandburg is something that I think is terrific and fitting, and you know, and renews our conviction that Chicago is a distinct and a strong source of literature around the world. And of course, the inaugural Civic Awardee, Donna LaPietra. My gosh, what a wonderful time she has had providing wonderful times for so many people in the city. And I'm so glad that she's recognized for the decoration that she has been in so many lives and the way she's nourished so many people. And now to Isabel Wilkerson, our distinguished award winner this year. Isabel, thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, it's so great to be here with you.
I want to get to your time in Chicago, if I could. You were New York Times bureau chief. I always tell people that Chicago is the best place to be a young journalist because you get to see all the strands that go into the world. I wonder how you felt about that.
Oh, Chicago is such an incredible place to be able to launch one's career as a writer. It's so legendary in our country's history when it comes to literature. You think of all of the amazing writers that have lived in or among the city, from Richard Wright to Hemingway. I mean, so many people. So it's just such a you're inspired just walking the streets of Chicago. And for that reason, I want to be sure to really thank the Chicago Public Library, the Chicago Public Library Foundation, the supporters of the library who made this possible, of course, to the mayor and the First Lady of Chicago. It's such an incredible honor. I must say that to have been chosen in 2013, 2014 as the Chicago Read, The Warmth of the Suns, when it was chosen was beyond imagining. I was the first time that a book was chosen for the entire year, and I was just absolutely overwhelmed by the fact that it had been chosen, that it was something that the entire city was dedicated to and committed to. and could see in that moment the power of the libraries. I mean, people were reading that book. You could see how many people, how many holds there might have been on the book. It was massive and incredible. And of course, to be able to come in to give the a talk at Harold Washington Library was just a magical, incredible experience that I will never ever forget. And so to be here with this award is just I'm overwhelmed and overcome, and so incredibly, incredibly grateful.
Well, thank you. We are very grateful. We're very grateful for your work and very grateful that you accepted the award. You're, of course, talking about your great book, The Warmth of Other Suns. You grew up in Washington, D.C., with two parents who had made what you cite as a great migration story, but you said, and your father was also a Tuskegee Airman, and like a lot of war veterans, it was just something they didn't seem to want to talk about.
Yeah, I mean that was one of the my first exposure to the depth and breadth of what had been an unnamed immigration experience within the borders of our own country. Came from my exposure to people who were surrounding me growing up in Washington D.C. You know, the parents and grandparents of everyone that I knew pretty much had been people who had escaped the Jim Crow South, people who had made that journey, essentially, you know, as you might say, defecting that caste system of the Jim Crow South. And I also saw growing up the beautiful predictability of migration, because having grown up in Washington D.C., I was surrounded by people who came from a particular part of the South, not just from all over the South, but almost everyone around me was from. The people were from North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Virginia. I mean, that was the way that it was. And of course, when I got to Chicago, I was exposed to a different route of the Great Migration, which is people who had come from Mississippi and from Arkansas, Tennessee, and Alabama to Chicago, and then on beyond to the rest of the Midwest. And then, of course, there was the West Coast stream, which carried people from Louisiana and Texas out to California. So growing up in Washington was my first exposure to it. But what was, it was quite interesting, and which ties this migration and the experiences of people who are coming from repressive regimes, the idea that people do not talk about the sadnesses and the in fact terror that they were fleeing. These people were experiencing post-traumatic stress. I mean, we have to remind ourselves that the place that they were fleeing, this is a place where it was against the law for a Black person and a white person to merely play checkers together. In some parts of the South, it was a place where in courtrooms throughout the South, there was a Black Bible and an altogether separate white Bible to swear to tell the truth on in court, and that really every aspect of one's life, from the moment you woke up until the moment that you turned in, were your every aspect was defined by, restricted by these protocols and actual formal laws that determined what people could do in that space, from really the end of Reconstruction until the 1960s, late 1960s. So this was a world that they were fleeing. And we have to also remember that these were often matters of life and death. I mean, people, could lose their life for some breach of that caste system into which they had been born. And so they did not speak of it. They did not speak of it. It was almost as if by the time the date that they arrived in the new world, you might say, was like the beginning, it was like a new birth date for them. And so I grew up around people who were part of this phenomenon, but very rarely spoke of it. They didn't share it with their children. They didn't speak of it. They were still experiencing post-traumatic stress. They were survivors of Jim Crow, and they didn't speak of it. So yes, this was an effort to try to excavate and to understand that which had affected so many African Americans who grew up in the North, the Midwest, and West.
With the advantage of the perspective you get while receiving this award, what do you think it was that made you a writer? I wonder if there was some thought of, well, my parents don't want to tell their stories, but maybe I can tell the stories of many people.
You know, I can't say specifically what that might have been. I can only say that as someone who loved to read, loved language, grew up hearing as I was saying, growing up around people who were from the South themselves. I mean, I heard the lyricism of the Southern accents that just you begin to absorb without recognizing the magic of it. So I think that probably was a big part of it. The ways of speaking, the language that they were bringing, nor even though I didn't speak that way myself, I was picking up on it. It's literally the only thing that I've ever done. I've never done anything other than be a writer. And every chance I had to do any writing, that was what I did. At every point that there was an opportunity, whether it was the student newspaper or whatever it might have been, I was there and excited to do it. So it's the only thing I've ever done.
Did you are known in journalism and certainly in your books for interviewing a lot of people to find just the right story or the right two or three stories? Can you tell us about that process?
Well,
I mean,
yeah,
it's incredibly scrupulous, and I keep thinking of probably there are 900 other stories that. Well, I'll let you talk about how you decide what to go ahead with.
Yeah, well, the kind of work that I do is called narrative nonfiction, and it is really the closest that a person may come to a reader may come to actually being another person, because these are true stories, but they're told in such a way that they are incorporating many of the aspects and characteristics of a novel. So you go deep into the hearts and the motivations, the triumphs and the trials and of people, and it takes a tremendous amount of work and time to be able to build the trust with someone, to be able to really be around them. Participant observation, it's really closer to ethnography than it is strict journalism. So it's a tremendous investment of time and energy. And so that means that if you're going to be doing narrative nonfiction, in which you are writing about not subjects but protagonists who are experiencing their lives in scenes and in action, and there's suspense, all these things that we think of with literature, we can actually apply. But in our case, we have to first get the story. We have to first hear the experiences. We need to build relationships and trust and a connection with people who will be willing and open and in fact really comfortable to be able to share those things with us. So it takes a tremendous amount of time. So that's why so much of my energy is spent on the search for who those people might be, because who you end up focusing in on will determine the course of the work, because their story will ultimately be the story that you tell. And so for The Warmth of the Suns, for example, I ended up thinking of Chicago. I ended up going all over the South Side, going to AARP meetings where people actually met. I mean, I don't know that people realize that AARP meetings, they actually meet. I went to the meetings of the, say, pensioners from the CTA, the bus drivers, and the pensioners from the post office. I mean, there were so many meetings that I went to just to be able to go and listen and to hear and to meet as many people who might have been part of the Great Migration. I went to the many, many, many Mississippi clubs in Chicago. There was a Greenwood, Mississippi club. There was a Greenville, Mississippi club. There was a Brookhaven, Mississippi club, a Newton, Mississippi club. And if you were from Brookhaven, you didn't go to the Newton, Mississippi club. So you had to go to all of the different clubs. And those were the places where I had the joy and the privilege of being able to meet people. So many people who had survived Jim Crow and who had made that journey north during the time of the Great Migration. And I viewed that part of the work as kind of like, it was kind of like an auditioning people for the role of being a protagonist in the book. It was like a casting call for the role of being a protagonist in the book. And those were some of the most enlightening and just fulfilling experiences just to hear so many people. I ended up talking with more than 1,200 people in the three cities that I was looking at, New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. And it was in that process that I ended up meeting the daughter of Ida Mae Brandon Gladney, who signed her mother up for what was a request to talk with people who had been part of the Great Migration, and that is how I ended up meeting her. It was a very long process to be able to narrow it down, and by the end of the casting calls, you might say, I had narrowed it down to about 30 people, any one of whom could have been among the three, but I narrowed it down to the three for the reason that each one represented a different aspect of the migration. They represented different precipitating events, motivations. They also represented the different socioeconomic stations of people who were part of the Great Migration. Ida Mae Brandon Gladney was, in fact, a sharecropper's wife who left Chickasaw County, Mississippi in 1937 to head north with her family. So she was chosen. But one of the things that they had that was probably a determining factor for many reasons. One of them is that there was a lovely connection between us, but also they all had a tremendous sense of humor, and to be able to tell the story of that magnitude that was going to carry the reader through much of the 20th century, through much of the really challenging parts of our country's history, meant that they were our tour guides through the 20th century. And in doing so, that meant that there needed to be a sense of humor, a way of looking at the world, a depth and a wisdom, as they were recalling what they'd been through. Again, people who had not spoken about this really with their own children, but who felt that they were ready now. They'd reached a point in their lives where they were ready to tell their story. And so it was a tremendous gift, not to me, but really to anyone who reads a book. And I think really a gift to the world to be able to hear their testimony.
Well, and that brings us to Caste, The Origins of Our Discontents, your fine work. We still see America as a nation of immigrants and migrants, as you detailed stories of people moving inside the country from the south to the north, but also a nation that, maybe impelled by that fact, devised a kind of heartless filing system, a hierarchy.
Yeah, in the process of creating what was ultimately a bipolar caste system that originates back to colonial Virginia, with clearly the arrival of the colonists, the British colonists, who then decimated the numbers of indigenous people and then transported Africans to be enslaved to build this colony that would ultimately become the United States out of wilderness. They thus set in motion a bipolar caste system in which they established themselves at the very top, and then they positioned through both custom law protocols that evolved over the succeeding decades of the 17th century. They created a bipolar caste system, and so anyone entering the country from that time forward had to manage and had to navigate where they were going to fit into that bipolar caste system. And it turned out that people might have arrived from Poland or from Ireland or from Hungary, and they were arriving without any identifying characteristic or a sense of identifying themselves in terms of race. Race is a fairly new concept in human history. Caste as a concept goes back many, many millennia, but the idea of race really dates back to the transatlantic slave trade and to the colonization that occurred in the New World and the creation of what in the United States became a bipolar caste system. And so anyone entering the country had to navigate and figure out where they were going to fit in. And it turned out that upon arrival, people who were from Ireland or Poland or from Hungary might not have had any thoughts of themselves in terms of what we now view as race, in terms of being white. White was is a new construct, relatively speaking, in human history. But upon arrival, it turned out that there was already a pre-existing hierarchy, and they were then apportioned to, assigned to the category now known as white, and people who were arriving from other parts of the African diaspora also found themselves to be collected into the filing system that you described. What a wonderful way to put it. A filing system that apportioned them, assigned them to the category of Black, no matter what their pre-existing identification might have been, which would have been ethnic or whatever part of the region that they were from. But they were not necessarily thinking of themselves in terms of what they look like, because they were coming from a place where everyone, had a similar skin color, both whether Europe or from Africa. So these are creations. And so people who arrived here found themselves assigned to an arbitrary, artificial hierarchy of human value. And that is how the caste system emerged in our country. And we live now with the after effects of that, in which we often don't even question. I mean, we've lived with the idea of race for so long as we've inherited this language that we take this to be essentially the laws of nature. But in fact, these are human constructions. And this is a reminder when we think about the hierarchy that we've inherited. It's a reminder of the artificial nature of its original construction.
Yeah, and look, this is an uncomfortable fact to get hold of, but I feel the need to state it plainly. When German Nazis were studying what kind of constructs, if you please, they could use against Jews, they looked to the Jim Crow South and America, didn't they?
Yeah, it's just astonishing and very wrenching to discover this, this history. I in the process of working on this latest book, I was focusing primarily on India, which was originally from because it was the best known caste system clearly in the world. And then Charlottesville happened, and after that, I mean, that's where we saw the merging of these symbols of the Confederacy and of Nazi Germany, and that the people who were the protesters are the ones who brought together the symbols, and so that meant that I think everyone in the country was stunned to see what happened there, and that inspired me to look more deeply into Germany and how they had managed what would be their memory of the war, and how they had managed the reckoning of that war, and had attempted to atone for that. And that's what sent me to Germany to begin with. And then, the more that I researched it, I then, came upon these things that I just would never have imagined. The idea that German eugenicists were in dialogue with American eugenicists in the years leading up to the war. I had no idea that American eugenicists were actually writing books that were huge bestsellers in Germany. In fact, books that were written by American eugenicists were used in the school curricula for the Nazis. I just had no idea of that. And then, of course, the Nazis needed no one. They absolutely needed no one to teach them how to hate. They needed no one to teach them how to hate. But it turned out that they sent researchers to the United States to study the Jim Crow laws, to study the anti-miscegenation laws that prohibited marriage across racial lines, and that actually were existing beyond just the Jim Crow South. At some point or other, 41 of the 50 states had some laws against marriage across racial lines. And then they also, the Nazis also studied the many very precise definitions of who was considered to be Black, who was considered to be white, who was considered to be Chinese, that were basically adding fractions of heritage, fractions of blood to determine one's identity, of defining race. So they were studying all of those things as they were they were studying the American jurisprudence regarding race and anti-miscegenation as they were formulating what would ultimately become the Nuremberg laws. This was just astonishing and wrenching to discover.
Yeah. How do we explain, at the same time, though, there are so many people who came to the U.S. to be free of caste systems and pogroms and imperialism and oppression. I mean, I remember when President Obama was running in 2008, there was a joke Kenyans made where they said a luau, which is, of course, a national group in Kenya, will be president of the United States before a luau will ever be president in Kenya.
Yeah, well, that's why I describe, this the idea of caste as, a different way of looking at our country to see the centuries-long assumptions, stereotypes, hierarchy that we have inherited, that mean that we have all been taught, absorbed through the culture, assumptions and stereotypes as to who belongs where, who should be doing what kind of work. These are the things that we've inherited. And so I describe our country as being like an old house. And when you have an old house, you know that the work is never done. There's, as soon as you finish one thing, there's something else that needs attention. And when you think of ourselves as having inherited an old house, we may have nothing to do with the pillars and the joists and the beams that may be askew, that may need repair. We may have had nothing to do with the construction of that, but when we take possession of it, when we are the ones who have inherited something, we then have inherited all that is good and all that is challenging and all that is actually wrong with the old house that we may have inherited. And you often don't want to go into the basement after a rain, but if you don't go into the basement, it's at your own peril, because you will have to face whatever is there, regardless of whether you're aware of it or not. Ignorance is no protection from the consequences of one's inaction. And so this is a way of understanding how we have inherited this, wherever people may have come from, whatever we may be, whatever our own experiences may have been. We have been born into a pre-existing hierarchy whose effects we still live under, whose shadow we still live under. And of course, in recent years, we have seen the ongoing shadow of this caste system, as we've seen videos of ordinary people just going about their day, and someone stops them, interjects themselves into their world, as happened to the two men who were just at a Starbucks about to order, waiting for a friend actually, and someone called the police on them and felt that they didn't belong there. There was a case of a bird watcher, a black bird watcher who was in Central Park, and a woman called the police on him after he said to her that her dog was running free and was running loose, and so she felt that this was out of line, and she actually called the police on him. So we have seen that, of course, and of course we've seen the more extreme examples of we have seen people killed before our very eyes. In our current era, these are things that should not happen to anyone on the planet, and yet they're happening in our own country. We all saw what happened to George Floyd, just this past summer. We have seen the effects of this enduring devaluation of those who descended from people who had been born to the subjugated group throughout our country. One other thing I'd like to say about this whole idea of our inheritance is just to remind us how long enslavement lasted, this foundational institution that was a part of our country for so long. We often think of it as ancient history. Many people think of it as long, long ago, but enslavement lasted for so long that no American, no adult will be alive at the point at which African Americans will have been free for as long as they were enslaved. That will not be until the year 2111. That's how long enslavement lasted. It lasted for 246 years, 12 generations. You try to think about how many greats you add to the word grandparent to begin to comprehend how long enslavement lasted in our country. So it lasted for longer than there has been a United States. It won't be until the year 2022 that the United States will have been a free and independent nation for as long as enslavement, the foundation of the hierarchy that we live with, will have been in place. So that means that it won't be until the year 2022 that the United States will have been a free and independent nation for as long as enslavement lasted in our country. These are the ways of beginning to understand how even in our current era, we still live under the shadow of what we've inherited.
And how do you feel about this country this fall? Country's been through a lot in recent months. I wonder what your feelings are now.
It certainly has. I view this as a continuum. You know, I view this as a continuum. In the book, I, make so many efforts to be able to describe how we have inherited this. This is, I describe it as one of the, I have lots of metaphors in this book, and one of the metaphors is to remind us that when we go to the doctor, before the doctor will see us, he or she will often give us this, clipboard with all these pages to fill out. And on those pages, we are asked questions about our history, and not only our history, but often our parents' history and our grandparents' history before us. And that means that the doctor will not begin to hazard a diagnosis until the doctor knows your history. And so we are now living with the consequences of unaddressed history. That is what we're dealing with. And I often say that that we as Americans are like people who entered a movie theater in the middle of the movie. And there on the screen, we see a bus that's chasing a car that's chasing a motorcycle, and none of it makes sense. It doesn't make sense to us. And it's you could watch the end of the movie and it still may not make sense. And you have to go back to the beginning of the movie and sort of see it from the beginning in order to be able to understand what was it that you were looking at that moment you walked into the theater. And so we are like people who walked into the middle of a theater. A lot of things don't make sense until you look back at the history and it all begins to make sense. It all begins to click into place. It's almost like once you see it, you can't unsee it. And so that is really what history is. History is merely what happened in the movie before we entered the theater. And that is what I think our era calls upon us to do, to be able to really, truly get to know our history. After The Warmth of the Suns came out, I heard from people from all over the country. I was on the road with that book for almost 10 years. It's stunning. The book has been out for 10 years and it's back on the New York Times bestseller list, which is just a stunning thing to have experienced. And so whenever I would talk with people, I would hear the same thing over and over from people, no matter where in the country that they were from. They would say, I had no idea. I had no idea this happened in my country. For the oldest people that I might have met, they would say, I had no idea that this happened in my lifetime. That the idea that they did not know and had no idea of what had happened in their own country means that there's a tremendous amount of work that we all need to do to learn our history, to learn what happened before us, because not having an idea has consequences. And I think it's time that we begin to do the work of better knowing our history so that we can work toward making this not just a better place for our families and our communities, but to be able to work through these challenges, because you cannot repair what you haven't named. You can't heal from what you have not diagnosed. And so this calls upon us to really get to know how we got to where we are for the sake of not only our families and our communities, but for the species and really for the planet.
Isabel Wilkerson, the 2020 Sandberg Award winner, thank you so much for being with us.
I want to say that I feel such a deep connection to Carl Sandburg. As a child, of course, I read and loved his poetry. It made me love Chicago before I'd even ever seen Chicago. So I just have such a reverence for him. But I also have another connection, and that is that in working on The Warmth of Other Suns, I looked everywhere that I could in order to understand the history of the Great Migration, what had been said about the Great Migration while it was in progress. And one of the first writers that I came upon was Carl Sandburg himself. It turned out that he was a reporter in Chicago before he became the renowned poet that we came to recognize him as. He was actually a reporter in Chicago, and he was one of the first people to write about the Great Migration as it was unfolding in Chicago. And he was the one who used the beautiful phrase, receiving stations of the Great Migration, as he was recording it. This was the big story of the day in 1916, 1917. And here he was Before he became, the renowned poet, there he was covering it in Chicago. And so that's why this means so much to me. Chicago is where I worked on The Warmth of the Suns, and Chicago means so much to me as a writer. And then to discover his connection to the Great Migration, it just felt so karmic and beautiful. And I am so very grateful for this award. Thank you so much.
Congratulations, Isabel. 2020 has been a year full of plot twists indeed. And through it all, the library and Library Foundation have played a pivotal role in the Chicago community and beyond, providing access to resources and support. Thanks to you, the Library Foundation will continue to be the innovation lever in response to the challenges ahead. Thank you for joining us for the 2020 Chicago Public Library Foundation Awards and celebrating these truly tremendous stories.